Hello everyone, my name is Emily and welcome back to my channel Read M, and today I have a super exciting video because guess what? Since it's September, we're halfway through the month, it is officially in my mind and in this room, as Peruse Project said in one of her most recent videos, it is fall. And to me, fall means it's time for some spooky, cozy reads. So I thought, wouldn't this be the perfect time to give some of my favorite spooky book recommendations to you guys? And I would love it if you guys would also comment some of your favorite scary books down below. I'm always in the mood to find more and to read any books that are disturbing in any way. So please pop those down in the comments down below if you have any good ones. So for today's video, I'm going to be breaking it up into 3 separate sections. The first of which is gonna have the most books, and that is horror. The second is thriller, and the third is mystery. The quick way that I would sum up these categories to myself and to you is that horror makes you ask, am I going to die? Thriller makes you ask, is everyone in this book going to die? And mysteries make you ask, why did that one person die? So without further ado, let's just jump right into my horror picks. Well, first off, this is a book I actually have not finished yet, but it is the book I'm currently reading, and I just had to mention it because it kind of inspired this entire video, and that is Parasite by Darcy Coates. Now, this book is actually a sci-fi horror novel, so it is not necessarily Halloween-y, but it is definitely disturbing. Just a quick little synopsis about this. I mean, honestly, I'm only 150 pages in. I don't know everything yet at all, but what it is about is a parasitic species that is kind of infiltrating humans' bodies, and you know, when that happens, you can't really know who to trust, and people are gonna have to die. You're gonna have to kill people you know. It's really fun so far, super disturbing. I love sci-fi horror and sci-fi with any sort of moral dilemmas, and this really brings that. Honestly, the cover itself is like disturbing enough that like I needed it in my hands, so that is what inspired this video, and I would recommend it so far. So next up is a much more classic horror kind of situation, and that is Rules for Vanishing by Kate Alice Marshall. Now, this is a young adult horror novel, and honestly, one of the most disturbing young adult books I've read. I don't think a lot of young adult books go as far as some adult ones go, but this one definitely goes gory. It definitely goes body horror, and I'm very grateful for that because it's what I was looking for. So this book is about a paranormal game of sorts because our main character's sister went missing several years ago because she played the game and she tried to go on the road, quote unquote. And so in this present timeline, when the whole school gets a text about the game, about the road, our main character and some of her friends decide she was going to go to the woods, try to conjure the road, and perhaps find her sister. And of course, you know, maybe the road actually is real. Maybe the road is actually deadly. Maybe the road has reasons why it took her sister, that kind of thing. Super scary, super fun. It's told in a multimedia format, which makes it even more engaging and super trippy, and just overall was a very good time. I will say the ending wasn't the strongest for me. It's a little more open-ended than I would like, but overall the journey of this book is super fun. Definitely gave me good spooky vibes, and I would really recommend for anyone looking for any sort of quintessential teen spooky ghost story paranormal game situation. Next up is another sort of trippy young adult horror book, and that is And the Trees Crept In by Dawn Cardigage. I actually read this book several years ago, but I still remember it to this day. Like, not every single detail about it, but I just remember how unnerved it made me and how quickly I read it. So this book is about 2 sisters who move in with some sort of estranged relative in this like spooky manor in the woods, and then they notice that every single day the trees seem to be getting closer, and there's a mysterious boy who comes to visit them, and they don't know where he could have possibly come from or who he really is. And from there it just kind of descends into madness. And again, this is not the best book if you're looking for any concrete answers, any logical solutions, because it just goes in wild directions, but it's very unnerving, very spooky, very haunted house energy, and I definitely recommend reading it not at night if you're squeamish, but you know, if you want to do that to yourself, feel free, because it's very exhilarating. Next up is a dystopian horror adult novel, and this is honestly one of my all-time favorite books, like of all time, and that is The Long Walk by Stephen King. Now, this book, I must warn you, will cause existential dread, like it is inevitable, and what it's about is that there is a competition every year where 100 boys are chosen or can volunteer to compete to walk. That is the premise of this entire book. 100 boys have to walk until there's only one left standing. And it sounds like it would be boring. It sounds like, how could that possibly be engaging? But you're so wrong. Like, this is the most exhilarating, like, heart-pounding book ever. It's not even about action. There is some gore, I will say that off the bat, but it's mostly about the endurance of like the human psyche, and it just messes with you. I've given this book to so many of my friends and they've all given it back and been like, why would you do that to me? But also, thank you, that was the best thing ever. Let me just warn you in advance, this book is heavy, but it's also amazing. Like, so good. Like, this is my favorite Stephen King, probably my favorite horror book in general. Just give it a shot. Like, just give it a shot. And I'm sorry in advance. We can switch gears a little bit and go with a book that's a little bit lighter for this list, although, you know, still a bit disturbing, and that is Horrid by Katrina Leno. First of all, take a look at that cover. Just let that sink in. I know that will make you want to buy it. This book is a young adult horror novel, but I will say it's definitely much lighter on the heavy aspects than many of the other books. This is a classic ghost story. It's another story where someone moves into like kind of a mysterious manor, except this one takes place in like a suburb, so it's not in the woods. However, the house seems to still be experiencing some spooky things. There might be ghosts, there might be ghouls, there might be things going on that our main character wants to figure out. In this book, I really actually enjoyed some of the contemporary aspects as well, some of the hangouts and sleepovers that the main character was having with her friends. This is a perfect Halloween-y book, specifically, like very cozy in a Halloween way. So if you're looking for something a little bit lighter, still disturbing, I would definitely recommend this one. Although, if you've read like a lot of horror, I don't really think this might be the best one for you, just because it's a little bit generic, but it still stands out as one of my favorite ones that I've read because I haven't read too many horror books. Now, next up, I'm gonna have to go in a very different direction. This one is not light. This one is another example of the existential dread debacle, and that is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. Now, I'm not going to tell you anything about this, except that it's short, that I read it in one day, and that while I was reading it, I jumped at every single sound I heard around me. This book is perfection, like actual perfection. In the beginning, you're gonna be like, where is this going? Like, what is going on here? But pay attention. Just pay attention to everything that they're saying. Just pay attention to the little details. And then once you get to the end, you're going to want to immediately flip back to the beginning and start over again because of how perfect and seamless and tightly written it is. It is exquisite. Don't look up anything about it. Don't look up the synopsis. Don't look up the movie trailer. Just read the book and suffer in the best way possible. Like, that's all you need to do. I beg of you, read this book. Let me know what you think about it because it's like my favorite thing ever. Just, oh, so good. This is definitely more psychological horror than gore. So don't worry about like the gory aspects or anything in this one. There's like no monsters, no whatever. It's just terrifying in the most human way possible. Next up is another sci-fi horror, similar to the first one I mentioned, but it's a bit of a different premise. So we have The God Game by Danny Tobey. Now, this is a young adult sci-fi horror, which is about a video game that comes out called The God Game. And basically the premise of it is if you lose, you die. This video game kind of blurs with reality. It kind of has its players do things in real life and they can't kind of escape from doing these things. It has a huge cast of characters, but I always remember being really, really impressed with what the author did here because I remember every single character had such a very neat character arc. It goes places that I just love in a thriller. As I was saying, I love moral dilemmas in thrillers, and this really takes it there. And this book specifically is one of the most fast-paced, addictive books I've ever read. Like, I read a lot of books, but I'm honestly someone who doesn't read a lot in one sitting. I usually read 60 pages, like an hour max, like per sitting. But this book, I was like flipping through. It was like 200 pages gone, 400 pages gone. Like, I was just going through, needed to know what's gonna happen next. I've given it to multiple of my friends as well, and they've also been obsessed with it because it's just so addictive. Next up is a bit of more of a classic, and that would be Misery by Stephen King. Now, if you're here on this list and you've already read horror books, I'm sure you've read this book. It's a lot of people's first introduction to horror, and I think it was mine. It was definitely my first introduction to Stephen King. This is a super classic. This one is much more gory. It's about a woman who kidnaps her favorite author and forces him to write the next books in his series. And he's injured, so that's why he can't escape. And that's kind of all you need to know. It very much takes place in isolation, so I know a lot of people love isolation thrillers. It is a bit more on the snowy side, so I feel like you could also read this maybe after Halloween, like more in the November, December region. But either way, super chilling, super creepy, super psychotic, but a fun time. I will say though that there is sections of this book that are a book within a book, and you can honestly skip those. Like, I skipped those. It didn't do anything. Like, it didn't ruin the book at all for me. Like, they're a little bit long, a little bit boring. So if you're having trouble getting through those, just skip them. No one will know. Okay, and last up in this horror category is There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins. Now, this book is so underrated, and I don't mean in popularity because Stephanie Perkins is super popular. I mean in literal rating on Goodreads. This book has like a kind of low average rating, and I feel like I've seen that the main complaints are that this teen slasher book didn't have enough slasher. But I'm like, did I read the same book as you guys? Because this book is such a slasher book. There's so much gore, so many deaths. It takes place, I believe, in Nebraska. There's so many corn mazes. Like, do you ever just want like corn in your horror media? Because I just feel like corn mazes are such a quintessential experience to like high school teen slasher situations. Like, what could be in the corn maze? A knife might be in the corn maze. Who knows? Like, literally, who knows? There's just such an eerie sense of dread throughout the whole thing. And I'm very excited because I know it's becoming a Netflix movie or TV show soon. And Stephanie Perkins has a new horror book coming out, or already came out this year or next year. And I'm just super excited to get to that as well. I think they're called like The Woods Are Watching or something like that. I don't know. Sounds spooky though. So now moving on to my thriller category, aka Is Everyone Gonna Die category. First up is my favorite young adult thriller of all time, and that is Here Lies Daniel Tate by Kristen Terrell. Now this book, again, is so underrated in terms of popularity. I haven't heard anyone read this book except for the friends that I've given it to, who have also all loved it. Now this one is a con artist story, which is one of my all-time favorite tropes, and this book is about a boy who hears about a missing boy, Daniel Tate, and he kind of gets mistaken for him. So he decides, well, I might as well just pretend to be him, go home with his family, and convince them that I am their missing son. And from there, it takes such turns, it goes to such lengths that you are like clutching your mouth at every single second. You're like, oh my god, like I can't even comprehend that this is happening, but I also can't look away. And the ending of this book is the most satisfying ending that I think could have happened. Like, I've always wanted a thriller to do this, and it did this, and it did it so well. And I just think that you need to read it now because not enough people have read it, and it is the cream of the crop of young adult thrillers. Next up, we have another unreliable narrator book, and that is The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sagar. Now, this is an adult thriller about a girl who one time in summer camp woke up and everyone in her cabin was missing, and she was kind of seen as the main suspect. However, now it is around 15-20 years later, and the camp is open again, and the owner has asked her to return as a counselor, and she doesn't really understand why she would be the one to be asked to do this when the owner had been so suspicious of her in the past. This book is super trippy, super fun. This is my first Riley Sagar I ever read, and I'm so excited to get to more of his stuff because this was just so good. There's a two truths and a lie motif, which I think just works so well with the camp theme. It goes again in such directions that you would not even expect, but in such a good way. I must say that this book, like, it's a masterclass in red herrings and misdirection. I don't think it's possible for you to guess the ending because there's just too many avenues for your brain to go down for you to possibly go down the right one. And I'm just in awe of it. Like, I was staying up so late to read this book. Like, I was reading it during the school year, and I was like, I just can't stop. Like, I just was flipping the pages. I was like sweating. The pages were like crinkling. It's just, please, if you want like such a good thriller, this is the one you need to read. Last up in this thriller category is Bones and All by Camille DeAngelis. Now, this is a young adult book in terms of age category. However, I do feel like the writing and the themes could kind of lend itself well into adult as well. And this thriller could also kind of blend into horror based on the subject matter. This one is super gore. So what it's about is about a young girl named Marin, and she is a cannibal. However, she's not a cannibal in the way you might expect. She's not a cannibal in a sense that she wants to eat people. It's more in a urge that she can't control. And so in the very beginning of the story, she gets abandoned by her mother, who discovers this secret about her. Now she has to kind of navigate the world, resisting these urges, and forming new relationships with people and keeping this a secret. It's just a very interesting book. It has a lot of interesting themes and commentary, and I'm super excited about the upcoming movie adaptation by Luca Guadagnino starring Taylor Russell and Timothée Chalamet, and I'm so excited for that. I really enjoyed this book, and I think more people need to read it. I think people will once they see that the movie's coming out, but at this point, like, it doesn't have that many readers, and I think it deserves more. It had a very interesting message, and just, I don't know, I still think about it sometimes, and I read it a little bit while ago at this point. For my last category, I have mystery, and for my first recommendation here, I have The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Now, this book is technically a sci-fi mystery. However, I don't mean that in the sense that it takes place in space or anything like that. It really reads more like a Victorian, like, British classic mystery book, but the catch is that the way that they have to figure out the mystery is only through one person, through the narrator. He wakes up at the start of the day of the crime over and over again, but it's in a body of a different person at the manor every single time. So he has to kind of piece together how this murder occurred by being those people, but also has to try to figure out why this is happening to him. It's super trippy. The beginning, I will say, is a bit hard to get into because there's just so much going on, but once you get like to the halfway point, it pays off, and the ending is ingenious. Like, I cannot wait to get to Stuart Turton, the author's newest release, The Devil in the Dark Water, because it really reminds me of Death in the Nile, and his tone overall is just super satisfying. I love a good British mystery in a big manner, and this one really delivers. Now, speaking of Death on the Nile, for my final recommendation of this video is, of course, Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. This is my favorite mystery book of all time. It is my favorite Agatha Christie book of all time. And the funny thing about that is that I actually predicted the exact ending from the first chapter. But I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in the best way possible. When I got to that first chapter, I just had a vision of what had to happen at the end, and I just knew that if it didn't happen that way, it wouldn't be right. And I knew Agatha would like know what to do. So she did it right. It was the ending I thought would happen, but it's so good. It's by far my favorite mystery, by far my favorite Agatha Christie. Again, I was staying up super late to read this, and I highly recommend, if you haven't read any Agatha Christie, or you have but you haven't read this one yet, please pick it up. It's a super closed doors mystery, all taking place on a boat, super big cast of characters, a lot of interesting commentary about like about the wealthy. It's just super fun, so much humor and so much life. I love Agatha Christie. Please check it out. So those are my recommendations that I have for you guys today on spooky books for fall. If you have any more, comment them down below. Consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!